AI might be the hype in 2023, but today's guest has been in the AI space for many years. He's a serial entrepreneur who has reshaped the fintech landscape with his AI-based ventures. But that's just the beginning. Today, he's the brilliant founder, chief technology officer, and chief product officer of Cognaize. Stay tuned if you want to learn about AI from an insider and some fantastic advice for aspiring entrepreneurs. So welcome by.
Thank you.
Yeah, very, very happy to have you here. Your background is so interesting. It would be great to kind of start with like a little bit of origin story, background, and how'd you go into this area of technology that's such a big hype this year?
Yes, sure.
And before everybody else did too. That's pretty, it was cool. It was cool for you before it was cool for everyone else.
And it's true. I started pretty soon with this because I was always interested in the topic of artificial intelligence. Well, I studied high frequency technology in Austria. And there was, of course, a lot of software engineering, which is an integral part of it. And we actually experimented with it in 98 till 2000, approximately. I was working for a bank. We were doing a hedge fund, and there was a CTA and a hedge fund. And the idea was basically to have this thing trade itself. And in our dreams, we were on the yachts, enjoying and drinking some good wine, and a bot was earning money for us. It didn't happen that way exactly. Actually, the hedge fund itself was pretty successful, but the idea was to take it out and be an independent asset manager, which the bank didn't want to do. So I left and started doing startups. That was the start of it, basically.
As far as your startups, was it like, bam, the first one and it was successful? Or
I was lucky, so that's I have been successful, yes, but it was not like that. It is definitely not like this. So it's first of all, for a pretty long time I didn't even have any idea of what I want to do. So I would spend my time at home. I think my mom and dad, they really loved this time because, when your son comes home, doesn't work and just thinks about what he wants to do. It's not the easiest time for them.
And I can relate, especially with Armenian parents.
Exactly. Right. You know that. Yeah. About 6 months or so, I was just thinking. And then my father obviously was talking all the time to me. You have to do something with your lives and so on. You know this. And one day, while he was doing that, we were at a restaurant, and he met a colleague, and that colleague came with her husband, and the husband was talking to me about AI. Then I said, that's interesting what he actually wants to do. It was basically, he wanted to do a name matching. So they were investing into a structured credit. And the problem that they had is they were buying lots of equity pieces, like the first loss piece. And in that piece, you obviously need to know what kind of issuers you're exposed to. But issuer names are not reported consistently. So what he wanted is some AI that tells him that I.B.M. and International Business Machines and IBM is the same company. I solved it and made a company out of that. But it was not with AI, actually. I mean, it was a pretty basic algorithm. It was not really AI, but we solved the issue.
That's where I was curious. When you were mentioning AI at this point, was it thought in terms of AI or more like machine learning, that aspect of it?
That's a very good question. So definitely machine learning, but that was not even machine learning. And so I think there are many ways you can classify it, but I think the best way to do it is as soon as you do some kind of feature engineering, so you are defining things that are important, then it's more machine learning. And if you really let it learn by example, then it's deep learning. And definitely not deep learning at that time. At that time, there was not even backpropagation as an algorithm invented yet. So deep learning was really just an idea at that point.
Okay, got it. But now the space you are playing in, it's surpassed the deep learning and now into the,
Now it's really deep learning, yes. So this is pure deep learning what we are doing, meaning that there is no feature engineering. And Gen AI is the latest trend in deep learning, basically.
actually, that was going to be my question. Is Gen AI technically a form of deep learning or something else?
Oh, technically a form of deep learning.
And I was curious too, just with where you live, because you mentioned Austria at some point. Are you in Germany now, or are you in Austria now?
Yes, I live in Germany now. I live in the plain, but Germany is where my family is. I grew up in Austria, next to Vienna, and then moved to Berlin first, and now live in Frankfurt.
Okay, got it. Did you ever live in US?
I spent a lot of time in the US, but officially I didn't live. Yeah, I always try to be less than 6 months there because tax-wise it's a little bit problematic if you stay too long in the US.
Understood. Okay, yeah, interesting. Got it.
That first company which makes sense, you found the problem and you solved it, which is a very common story of entrepreneurship. What came after that?
After that, the second one pretty fast because then you get the feel for it and you actually want to do it. I think it's very rewarding. Doing a startup is very rewarding, and I did it in a time where the financial crisis was, so it was very hard. And if you look back, it was certainly one of the best experiences that I could have had.
Wow. And why would you say that? Like, if we drill into that, why?
You learn so much, and not learn, not in the sense of what I need to do, but you learn about yourself, and you learn to deal with these kind of things, emotions and feelings, and it's hard. It's really hard. But then if you look back, it's rewarding. I think that's a general theme, actually. If you want to do a startup, you have to have a tremendous endurance for pain, because if you don't, then just don't do it.
No, I think it's a great point, and there has to be enough passion about what you're doing to get through that pain. Otherwise,
you won't do it. Exactly.
And I think that's where most people are, who are like, I'm going to do this, and then there's a little bit of pain. They're like, never mind.
I was actually going to touch on that too. The cliche term, like, do what you love. What I've kind of found from my experience is, while it's a cliche term, it actually makes sense in those instances. Because if you don't love it, the first kind of onslaught of pain, you're like, I'm out, peace. Was that what kind of, because you loved it so much, the passion of it kept you going, or were there different motivator or factors?
No, definitely the passion. But I think one has to differentiate a little bit, because actually I'm never doing what I actually love. I'm working towards that, right? But in reality, if you do a startup, you always do the things that are a problem right now, and that's usually never what you actually like to do. So you start with, I want to do AI, and I do AI, but then at the end, you're not actually doing AI because somebody else is doing for you, and then you're doing bookkeeping, or I don't know, something else, right? Something that you need to do at that moment, which is seldomly actually the thing that you want. But of course, the passion is there, and you want to do it, and you're creating something, so you get rewarded. But like literally, you're not doing what you actually want.
That's actually a really good point that I I think applies to so much, because we all assume, as we, are excited about that. But if you're the business owner, sometimes eventually that thing, unless your goal is, just building businesses, at which point, okay, great. Then there is that piece of it. But then you're probably frustrated when you're having to do the in the weeds stuff because you just want to build a business. So it's an interesting dichotomy.
Kind of sticking with that theme of, it's painful, there's so much involved. Were you at this time single or married with kids?
No, I was right about to be married. So I'm married. My wife basically 6 months after I met her. So it was pretty short dating period. I think I started the business like maybe a month before that. So like you can say we built it together. Definitely you can say.
And how would you say you juggle things or set expectations with her to make sure that that relationship is not being damaged by your relentless pursuit of company number 2 or company number 3?
Well, if you ask her, she will tell you the truth, which is I don't. So in reality, we got married in 2004, and our first vacation we did in 2017 after my second or third exit. And before that, I didn't even do vacation with her. So like you work like crazy, and she supports you. That's the secret, right?
Wow. I'm actually listening to Elon Musk's biography right now. And I just listened to the section where he talks about after he got out of PayPal X, he finally took a vacation and went to southern I think Latin America actually, and he caught malaria, and he was hospitalized almost to death. And from then on, he hates vacations. So he said, "I hate vacations because if I go, I get sick," which is interesting. You mentioned the amount of period you didn't take one, which is a theme I've been hearing recently with successful entrepreneurs.
Obviously, there is some value to resting, and obviously there is, right? It's not deniable. But also I think that if you look at the younger generation, sometimes this work-life balance it's like too much skewed into the direction of, let's have fun and not work. I mean, certainly when I grew up, the idea was very simple, right? You work very hard until you're 50, then you get your first heart attack, and then you recover, and then you work another 10 years hard, and then you get to be a senior citizen. You enjoy 2, 3, 4 years, and then, that's it. That was what we're looking forward to, right? That changed. I don't know. I mean, there is obviously, I'm not suggesting that people should work 24 hours, and nobody should, and you should rest. But also I think there is, if you really want to change something, it's not going to happen if you do a 9 to 5. That's good.
Yeah. I think what you said there too, sometimes because helping people like in the career space at times too, it's that one interesting thing where you have a lot of people out there who are recommending, you have to say no to everything. And it's like, to one degree, I get that concept because it's like, sure, because you got to know and stay focused on what you got. But on the other hand, sometimes I think it's horrible advice for like people who are in their career starting off, because no, actually at that state, you have to say yes to more to figure out what you're really like, you're into, to add more value, to be able to learn more faster. And if you're not willing to stack that more upfront, well, then you're going to pay the price later on. So it's just that interesting balance. To me, it's saying both, that's where the balance actually lies in.
I agree with all the statements that you said. The both, absolutely, right? So you have to be like almost schizophrenic as a entrepreneur all the time in almost all metrics, right? You have to be very stubborn, but very flexible. You have to be at all these things. Like it's always something like 2 extremes that you have to do at the same time. And I also agree with saying no is hugely important, but when, right? You have to understand when you need to do it. And you're right. When you're young, you should actually try everything out, right? I mean, you should live in other cities, go to other countries, try out, find your passion, find what's interesting for you, and try to have some impact there, right? So.
And I think there's that important correlation too, because there's so many people who, as they move along in their careers, because they often pursued a degree because either others told them, oh yeah, that would be a great one, or it seemed lucrative. Then they get into it. They don't really like it much. But if you don't have that mentality where you are willing to try all those things you can early on, then you're going to have a greater likelihood that as you're older, you don't know what you want because you're not testing those things. So anyway, it ends up working against you.
Going back to ask you questions about the acquisitions, how did you know that you're ready to give up your baby and then go after another baby?
I never think about exits. I actually really never did. It's a little bit cliche, but I really never thought about it. I remember very well in 2008, 9, when the financial crisis was. Shortly before that, I got a very good offer to sell the company, and I didn't even entertain it. So I didn't do it. And then like a month later or so, Lehman defaulted and my company was worth like from a couple of million to nothing, almost nothing. And it was hard. And my wife, she gave me a very, very good advice. She's much more intelligent than I am. So, you get into, it's like a depression mode. And then she said like, what's up? And I said, look, I mean, we could have sold it and then we would have lots of money at least. And she says that, like, why didn't you do it? I said, because I don't know what to do after that. And she said, okay, do you know what you want to do now? And I said, no. She said, okay, then continue. Like everything is perfect, right? You did the right decision, just continue, right? And that really worked. So I never thought about this. And in terms of, I want to make an exit, right? And actually, I mean, to be very honest with you, and this is some people who are very close to me, they know this, but I actually exited all the companies that I founded, and financially they were all successful. But I feel actually that I was a failure, because what I actually wanted to do is I wanted to change something. I wanted to change reality, right? And that didn't happen yet. Hopefully it happens now. And so for me, it was just a mission, and I'm going for that mission. So,
did you feel as strong about wanting to change something when you exited the other companies, or has that change been something that is more clear to you now?
For a very long time, it was already clear. Maybe not in that first startup there. It was really just more I just don't want to work for a large institution for a long time. That was the motivation there. But after that, yes, there was always this passion kind of thing. But the path towards that was very different. In the beginning, I was thinking like, you need to own everything. You have to do everything alone. Now I'm actually opposite direction. And so you change your strategy over the years, but I always, or almost always, felt I want to change something. I never did it for the money. I always did it, I want to change something.
Do you feel like that's stronger now because you're like, okay, I had these exits and I haven't done that? Or do you think it's also something you're able to pursue because those exits have given you more, I don't know, of a financial threshold that now you feel like?
They definitely give you some financial threshold, right? Because now you basically, you don't think about daily life kind of spendings anymore. But what they give you more is experience. So you feel actually more capable of doing that, right? And you also, and I always said it, and I always not, but for many years I'm saying this now. It's not so much about your strength, because almost everybody knows his or her strengths, but very few people know their weaknesses. So it's really to understand what are your weaknesses and what do you need to compensate. And that you learn over time. That's, for example, why I actually really begged almost, I have to say, not almost, actually really begged Al to come to join and be the CEO of the company. I mean, he was a mentor to me before that, and a friend, of course. So I knew him very well. But like, he's compensating exactly those things where I see my weaknesses. So it was like a perfect team.
Yeah, I think that good segue. So let's talk about Cognaize and what is the company and how are you using this as a vehicle to make the change that you've been in the search of?
I do think that we are living, all of us are living in a time where the biggest change to humanity will happen that has ever happened. Now, that statement is, of course, historically true for a lot of periods, right? Because at that time, it was the biggest thing. But I think this is different because for the first time, I think we don't know much, but one thing we know, we either are not anymore the most intelligent being on this earth, or soon will not be the most intelligent being on this earth. And that is, I think, a big change. I think it will be good, and I'm certainly working towards that. But it is a huge change. a huge change, and we're in the beginning. So it's like a rocket, and the trajectory in the beginning changes everything, right? So just a little bit in this direction or that direction changes the outcome tremendously. So that is why I would like to contribute to this, and I think we do contribute to this as a company.
So what does Cognaize do actually? Like who's the customers? What's the product or service?
Yeah, our customers are institutions in the financial industry, right? So a little bit broader. So it is banks and also insurance companies and rating agencies and so on. And we are about extraction. So we extract actionable intelligence from unstructured data. So anything that is like a PDF document, a chat protocol, a website, doesn't matter. If you want to extract something out there, then we are a very good partner for that. And we think that's actually a very important part because that is giving you additional information to base decisions on. So we help our, esteemed clients and partners to make easier, better decisions.
Is that related to more financial data, or is it any data?
Well, I mean, we are operating almost only in the financial industry, so it's mostly financial data, somehow financial data, but it's also lots of legal and real estate and like everything auxiliary around it. Infrastructure thing.
Okay. Now, are you seeing that in the industry, are big financial firms leaning more into companies with that expertise, such as yourself? Are they building them out internally, or is it a mixture?
I think it's a mixture, rightfully so. So you should do actually a few things yourself, right? You should not. I don't think that you should look at AI as a commodity kind of thing. It's not like power, right? So you actually really have to have an idea about this. So you should do things, but then again, a company like us can help you to accelerate the path because there is a huge learning curve that you need to do as a whole organization, from CEO all the way to left or right. Name whoever you want to. Everybody in this company has to have an idea about this from this different perspectives, obviously, but that's a huge learning curve, right? And now if you partner or work with us or companies like us, then they help you to spend less and do that learning curve faster at the end of the day.
And are you usually partnering with businesses in terms of basically looking at their unstructured data, running it through your own tools for those insights, or are you also looking at industry-wide data and selling back that information, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. We are not a data company, so we are not doing data sets, data curation, and then sell this as data sets, right? I have done this in the past. That was doing a previous company. I'm not doing this now. And we are also not a consulting business in the sense of looking them and then consulting them and helping them. So they come to us when they already have an idea what they would like to extract, but they struggle doing that. And now we come in place, and it's basically software, private SaaS model, meaning that we don't even see the data of our clients, and we are that's a core part of our strategy. We don't want to see it because many AI companies look at the world. I'm going to learn from you and then enable your competition, right? And we are not that way. I think AI is a whole capitalism, but AI also has a very big drive towards centralization, and we would like to be part of a organization that breaks that centralization, right? So decentralize a bit, and we enable anybody to compete against each other, and rather than everything centralized in one location.
Got it. It's, I think, important, as a lot of corporations are still nervous about how they leverage it. It makes me think a little bit of when we use Amazon, AWS, and that kind of stuff. Cloud is like, how do they do it, even though they have that whole infrastructure, so that you could still have your own little private, set of that sitting up there, but still, by API pull this other, tool to be able to run analysis. So it makes perfect sense.
You had mentioned earlier that to cover your weaknesses, you had brought in a CEO. So can you talk about that and got you to make that decision to say, I'm stepping down as CEO, I need a better CEO?
Yeah, so that's easy, because if you know your weakness, then you know that you're not the best CEO in that company. That was very clear for me. I did it because in the beginning you have to do it, otherwise nobody will follow you. Al, I know Al many years. Al Isayan, he's a very, very kind person, helping thousands of people. Right, has done many very visible exits, of course, himself, and after that he's advises, helps, supports wherever he can, and that's a lot because he can. He's really doing a lot. And he also helped me with one of my exits, where he consulted me a lot. And and so that's the time when I got to know him. He of course he tells a story a little bit different because I remember I lent him my bike and then he fell down with his bike and he always says jokingly, he tried to kill me. That's not what he said. Two stories he actually advised me. And then I tried to convince him, and he was doing his own still very successful startup. But there was a good window because he left his board. I mean, not the board, but he left his role as CEO there. And then, I convinced him to come here. And we were talking already very long. So you can say he's like a co-founder, right? Because we were almost getting started. And, but that was not, I also founded with a couple of friends together. So we were already 5-6 people. We started it. And then shortly after that, Al came and joined us basically.
How long ago was that?
Well, it's 4 years now, 3.5, 4 years.
Got it. I was going to say it's probably too late to do the ceremony, but there's a big PR thing there where you record for social media, you firing yourself, packing up your stuff, walking over to the other room so that the new CEO could start, but you haven't really fired yourself because you're still part of the company.
I think it was much easier there because he's a great guy.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, I think that is so key. And it's ironically one of the things that becomes easier to do when it is your own company. A lot of people get stuck in it's really the only way you do it. Where I'm going with it is people in the workplace. Unfortunately, it's like at times it's like, no, that's your weakness. Sorry, figure it out, solve for it. But the friction to do so can be so difficult at times. And it's hard if somebody tries to justify, well, I need to hire somebody to do this because it's like companies like, no, we've got one role here. And so I think a lot of people's potential is limited greatly at times because there's that huge piece of what they're doing that's just, they're built for. And it's an interesting, again, balance to find.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I do think that if you want to learn, you can learn anything, right? I mean, I'm doing lots of different things, but you also have to have fun doing it, right? At the end of the day. And if you really have fun doing it, you have passion for it, you're also better at that than somebody who has just learned, right?
By the way, the other thing that you said, I just have to say, because it's stuck with me. I hadn't really thought about what you mentioned about we may no longer be the most intelligent, whatever it is, I don't know if species, entity, whatever you say on the planet. I hadn't thought about it in that regard. I knew it was a potential in the future, but without, seeing the face of the Terminator or something else on it, you don't think.
Well, that's a very interesting point that you raise, right? So first of all, there is of course a school of thought that says to create actually intelligence, you need to be mobile, right? So you need to move, and that is rooted basically in how our brain evolved. Because we don't obviously know exactly, but there are species, for example, corals, that travel. And as long as they travel, they have a brain. And then when they start sitting somewhere and not move anymore, the first thing they do is they eat their own brain. And the idea of this is because it costs too much energy, right? So you don't want to maintain a brain if you're not moving. That's the whole
What
idea.
species is that?
It's corals. I can send you it's
okay. I'm so intrigued. I've never heard of that. My kids are going to love it too.
Yeah, I can tell you this. So it's interesting. So this is just one example, of course, right? But it seems that so there's definitely that school of thought. I also think that that moving could be important, but in reality, what is more important is understanding of time and space. Right? These are the two things, and this is not me, obviously. This is Kant as the first philosopher who said this a priori knowledge of space and time is the only reason why we can actually sort our thoughts and then communicate with each other meaningfully. So I think that is true. And he said it a long time ago, but then, 2014, I think the Nobel Prize went to people who found grid cells, which are basically telling you location, I think. So it seems to be true. And then if you look at the latest revolution that we had now with this AI, it happened when we gave these words a positional encoding. So they always had a sense of time because one word comes after the other word, but they never had a sense of location. And now we taught it location, and look what happened, right? So I think that makes sense. What I'm trying to say is you probably don't need to have a robot for intelligence. So it's enough if they understand time and space. I think that probably is necessary, at least so that we can recognize it as intelligence. But it's still very dangerous because we always think of the danger of AI being a Terminator coming and killing us. But think of it this way, right? And here I'm citing Harari, but think of it this way, that what is it that makes humans so successful? And Harari at least thinks it is that we can understand abstract concepts. And because we have that with the language, we can organize ourselves. And when we organize ourselves, then we can be, because his main argument is this, right? If he, or I put it on me, if I'm on an island and a chimpanzee is on an island, the chimpanzee will survive, I will die, right? I mean, if there's no microwave, I'll die anyway. But let's say even if there is a microwave, there is no way, right? So the question is then, though, how is it that humanity is like ruling the world and chimpanzees are in zoos, right? And the reason is basically they cannot organize themselves in large groups. They can do it like in 10, 20, 30, but not in 10,000 or 100,000. But we can because of abstract concepts and so on, right? Harari goes on, it says like even the dollar is a concept and, is just a story, and a company is just a story and so on, because we can tell these stories and people can subscribe to them. This is why we can organize ourselves. Now, if you take that, then language is basically the basis for everything, because language is now creating your culture, creating everything, right? Everything starts with language. Now, if you follow all the way to here, then the actual danger is not that a robot comes and kills you. The actual danger is that AI convinces somebody to go and press a nuclear button or does something. And that actually can happen. So it's not entirely impossible, right? I mean, I wouldn't say it's like 100% kind of scenario, obviously, but like even if you give it a small percentage of 2-3% over the years, it accumulates, right?
Stuff like that to me is eventually, there will be some form of that. It's just a matter of, this is where I'm really interested in some of the controls and other things, like, because it does seem like everything's moving so fast. I'm just like, who's keeping this in check? Yeah.
And you're very right? So the argument is, right, that it can manipulate you and you don't even know that's an AI bot, basically, that is doing that. And because it speaks so well the language, it can actually build some intimacy with you and manipulate you, right? And we see that already, right? We see it. Look, I mean, 2 people already came out, one from Google, I think, and the other one, was it also Google? I don't remember. Like they were like basically testing LLMs, but then they feel like this is their best friend and they, it's conscious and so on, right? So I don't want to say it's not conscious because we don't know even what consciousness is at the end of the day. So, but it's definitely not the best friend, right? But they feel like it already because they get very intimate with these things. So that is really there. I would bring as a counter argument. What I bring as a counter argument is my daughter, right? Because this is what happens to me. So when I grew up and somebody calls you, it means that you need to leave your room, go somewhere where a telephone is because they had these cords, right? And then you pick up, and it was an event. It was great, right? Somebody's calling you, right? You want to go somewhere, movies, whatever, right? So it's great.
Now you're just like, please, I just stop.
Exactly, right? But here comes the interesting thing. I still feel like if my telephone rings, I have to pick up.
It's true.
So I sit and then, and I call my daughter and I know she's on the phone and she doesn't pick up. And then I go, I was like, why don't you pick up? And she says like, I wasn't interested in talking to you. Like it's very natural for them, right?
Yeah.
So here's some depth to that story, because what it means is that humanity is also changing, right? So she deals with technology differently than I deal with technology.
Yeah.
We tend to believe, us probably not anymore, but the generation older than us tend to believe everything that was ever written, right? Because who was writing books? You had to be So now everybody writes a book, right? So now it's not anymore a thing. But we're still not at that level that our children are going to be. They literally probably are not going to trust anything. Also pictures not, right? And nothing, right? Because they just grow up in a world where this is normal and everything can be fake.
Right.
So I think that we can actually learn dealing with it. Of course, there's a generation or 2 or 3 that is problematic, but after that, I think it could find a new equilibrium where people just don't trust these things anymore.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I want to keep going down this hole, but Artin's probably like, I got a couple other things I want to dive into here, but I feel like just have a conversation at some point around just like the future. I'm so curious to your thoughts. I'd say I'm flying out now for dinner, but I probably, won't do that. You're too far away, but I love it when you and your friends get together. It's probably a very fascinating, getting close to solving, or if not solving, picturing,
The problem is this. It's not that interesting. It's very interesting, but it's not what people think it is. And the reason is, usually, at least, I think almost always, but if it's not always, usually, you need to understand some concepts in nature and then you copy it through technology. So like planes, you understand how a wing works. Now you can copy it. The problem is we don't understand how our brain works at all. Right. So we have some very rudimentary idea and that changes literally every couple of months. Right. We find something new. But that idea that we have is on a very low level, like it's chemical imbalance and these kind of things. And then we have some idea about cognitive science, but these two actually don't connect, right? We can't actually say from cognitive all the way down, like here, we call this, sodium and potassium thing. We can't say that. And again, we are finding a couple of months ago, they found a new cell and a new thing. And we don't know anything about our brain. So that's why we can't copy it, right? Because we don't know anything about it. So the question is, if you're then just experimenting, why is it that we are actually achieving that good results? And I think of it this way. Think of Leonardo da Vinci, right? He's one of the most genius people who have ever lived. And he loved flying. And he tried flying, right? And he failed. But how many experiments could he do, right? Because every time he done an experiment, then he's needs to recover a couple of months, right?
Right.
So the speed is very slow, but with AI, it's very fast. So we don't know what we're doing. We're just trying out everything, or we're trying out a lot, but we're doing it at a speed where we actually start finding, the needle in the haystack.
Yeah.
Now, the second problem that we have is we can't predict when we find it. So, which means we really don't know. Sometimes these language models already have an ability for a couple of months until somebody finds out, hey, this thing now can do this, and before it couldn't, right? So it's which makes it also a little bit dangerous, right? Because you really don't know what's happening. But that's the current state. We have to. So it's also very difficult to predict where we are going to be in 5 years. What I can say is that the speed that we're going right now is incredible.
Yeah.
And I do think that the society will not be able to keep this, meaning that regulation, other things will just kick in at some point, right? You can see it already, lawsuits and other things happening. So I think because of that, it will slow down, or might probably will at least a little bit slow down. But it's hard to say where we're going to end.
And any bold predictions from your end?
My bold prediction is we're going to create more jobs than we're going to destroy. That is my bold prediction. It's going to be hard, so it's not something where we say, "Oh, great, everything is great." No, it's not great. But if you look at the last couple of industrial revolutions, right? We're starting with steam power and so on. We always actually created more jobs at the end than we had before. And we, of course, for 1, 2, 3 generations, it was hell, right? It was really hell, right? It was hell for during the British agricultural revolution when people came into the cities and they had nothing granted. That was hell, right? But after that period, it turned out for humanity or society just a better place, right? Everybody's richer, everybody's, because the economic pie is just growing. And I think the same thing will happen here. I hope that we don't need 3 or 4 generations of suffering, and I actually think that we won't. I think these concepts of, and I'm really I have not studied them intimately, but these concepts of, base salary for doing basically nothing, right? It might be a solution. Maybe it's not. I have no idea, but I do think that we're thinking about these things, and it's important to think about these things. And at the end, I think it will just be better. And the reason why I think it's going to be better is twofold. So first is, almost anything that we're producing right now has this property that Kramer found out first or documented first, which is if you have these chains, right? You're baking bread, right? Or you're doing Challenger rocket. So if you do a mistake in one process, it doesn't make your end product a little bit worse. It just destroys it entirely, right? So you have a problem with the O-ring, your whole rocket is done. And unfortunately, people died with this, right? You do some mistake in baking bread, instead of, I don't know, salt, you put in sugar. The whole thing is, you just did one mistake, right? But the whole thing is uneven. So that's Kramer's O-ring theory. And almost anything that you're doing is this. What it means is, as soon as you start automate something with machine perfection, it puts a tremendous pressure on all the other processes. Tremendous. And this tremendous pressure creates jobs. Now you have to. And the second, and that phenomenon was true back then and is still true now. And the other thing which was true and is also true is human, for the lack of a better word, I just say greed, right? So we come up with new ideas, with new products that might be totally unnecessary or might not be unnecessary, but they create a huge, markets, right? Think of Tamagotchi. Tamagotchi, this electric animal. So there's an electric animal that you have to feed. If you don't feed it, it just dies.
My kids have them. Yes, I get them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know where you are, but if you're in California, this is the thing that I always bring when I speak in Germany. I say, you know what? In California, there's a thing which is called goat yoga. So they do yoga and then there are goats around, right? So
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's no value to this. I'm not saying, but it wasn't there 10 years ago, right? Yeah. It's new. Yeah. So somebody created this now, and now somebody has to clean this goat, feed this goat, do all these things with this, right? So that creates jobs. So I think these two phenomena, that we are continuously inventing things that create jobs, plus the Kramer's O-ring theory have been true in the last revolutions and are true now. And this is why I think my prediction is we are going to actually create more jobs than we're destroying.
It's really interesting, and it does make me wonder as you say those things. Like when I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, well, depending on if there's that universal income, it's like, okay, now you might meet these bottom ones, but that actually means that the future jobs may be around helping people reach this self-actualization, or at least somewhere up there in these other stages, which a lot of people have been, well, we're not really good at. Going back to some of the understanding human brain and other stuff, like that's probably where some more and more focus goes. But anyway, yeah, there is that debate always about jobs. And I do think that initially there are a lot of jobs that will be impacted. And
Well, I
but
don't know. Not tremendous. It's going to
yeah,
be hard, right?
but
It's
the
going
key
to be
is
very hard. When I say we create jobs, doesn't mean that we are not destroying also jobs, right? I mean, just think of this word computer, right? Computer were people who are doing calculation. It's now something entirely different. And we will have that too a lot, right? But we also, I think we're going to create more at the end. So
I think it makes sense. I also think it's human ingenuity, the way that we operate, the way that we think. It's like we, sent alone or left alone with our thoughts. That maybe it's that abstract thinking you're talking about, the creativity. It's like we can't help but then go and whether it's try to find value for ourselves or try to assist others. You just start creating these things. But I am. It is. I think right now the idea of the jobs and AI's impact. I think what I say sometimes, and others say I stole, I'm sure for it, but the idea is that it's not AI is not taking people's jobs. The person who uses AI is going to take your job.
that's definitely true right now. Right now, that's definitely true.
Art and I, even with this podcast and with any of the shorts, any of the editing, I mean, the tools that are coming out are amazing of what they can do just in this space. That means that you no longer have to go out and hire a full-on crew. You could do a lot of yourself. And granted, we have a background in this and it helps a little bit, but the reality is it's huge what these tools, and they just keep getting better and better. It's amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
But just like what I said, we now don't need a production crew or editors, but because we're producing so much content, we need other types of people to hire to just help us manage all the content that gets created. It's this really interesting balance.
When I think about again, filmmaking, and when we went from film editing to nonlinear editing, it's like, well, now you just created this whole other world around the software side of it. You technically did take some of the jobs, like somebody earlier who would have been like, the negative cutter and have those, but you have like different jobs now in DI producing all these other things. Like there's all these other jobs that came out of it. And then it opened it up to the masses that you could have never really done so easily before. So it's like, when we start thinking about these industries, it's easier to think about where this might go. And I also think that there will be a lot of people who are going more that route of I don't know. I almost think about it in the past. In the past history, you had people who were farmers, if you will, in that case, and then some of them started taking on these specific jobs, but they might have been specific. In fact, their last names were often named for their jobs, Smith and others, as they had that. I do think in this future, as people start taking some of the stuff, whether it's the piece they're good at in their day-to-day or whatever it is, and they start turning that into these, again, little proprietorship. They might not be big businesses. They might just be businesses of one.
Like absolutely, right? We see that already, right? There are even, you can see this trend even in the legal space already, right? Because we even have in Germany, probably you have in the US, we have even a company type for that, right? Like Gesellschaft, right? Where you you're alone and you're doing some business, then like it's all the way down there, right? Like this, we say in German, Ich AG, right? So I'm the PLC of myself, right? So basically I'm creating a company like this. That is, we can see that already happen.
What's that term?
Ich AG. Ich means me or myself or I, and AG is Aktiengesellschaft, which is like public limited company.
And wait, did you say that was a German term or a Japanese term?
German.
The Japanese had some word that was similar to it, but I probably completely different meaning. But just as I heard it, it sounds okay. Got it.
I mean, Vahe, this is so fascinating. I feel like we can talk for hours, but just for your sake and your times that you're in, just to wrap this up, what is some advice that you have for like aspiring entrepreneurs, especially in the tech space?
I have been criticized for it, but I'm still going. I stick with this. I'm going to say this. This is this. Find your passion, really. If you are doing it for money, don't do it. It is hard and it is pain. It is pain, right? So you have to get used to this. It's really hard, right? And if you don't have passion for it, if you're doing it for money, you will not be successful. It's just that the probability of that is so minuscule. Go and play, casino or something. You have better chances. So it's really, you have to have a passion for it and you have to work very hard. But at the end, it's very rewarding, right? I always say look, nobody gives you, or at least you will not be proud if you get in mentally, if you run 42 meters, right? But if you run 42 kilometers, then you're very proud of it. Because there's pain that you go through. And this is the same thing. At the end, it's very rewarding, but you have to stick to it, and it's hard.
Enough of the sours, the sweet's a lot better. We had somebody recently who is leveraging and talking about the term of, the probability of success, which I really like. Because when you look at this, and, it's like now Artin shared a story the other day about how, his, who was it who came over to your house who mentioned YouTube, and like you had a studio and they were.
Oh, it was my wife's nephews.
Okay. So they're like, whoa, what is this? And he's like, well, I have a podcast, and it's like, on YouTube, you're a star. And anyway, so the idea though is still the probability of success, just as, what's your probability of success being a YouTube star, being an actor, being an athlete, being an entrepreneur, being an accountant, which maybe in the future with, again, more AI, maybe that's even probabilities are. But when you look at how these all stack up, it's they have this rank, and then you could put in there playing the lottery, you could put in there gambling. And I think people understanding that though, because then if you do, it's like, okay, great though. Your probability of success here is much lower, but it's much lower because, you can inform things such as your approach, but also heavily on, again, the time and your willingness to put up with that pain, as you said, which most people aren't, which is why the probability also becomes, lower. And with acting, going down that route, there's some of that. There's other things at play there, just like being a model, which I think Artin and I's days of being models are over. But his basketball he talked about, yeah, it's like, okay, fine.
Sometime when I had an interview, somebody asked me, like, what is your superpower, my superpower? And I said, my superpower is having luck. So I think as a good entrepreneur, you also need a little bit luck. It's very important.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. There's somebody, I forget their name, but they talk a lot about how you increase your luck surface, though. Because I think, again, with that, I agree. Look, but you do certain things in
life. You have to be prepared for it, right?
Yeah,
you have to be prepared for
so
it. Exactly.
you may only have that much luck coming your way, but if you did a lot more things, like you build a really good network and you build other things, then your luck surface increases, which I think ties back to some of the probability of success.
Yes, absolutely.
Vahe, if our listeners want to find you, either for amazing insights or they want to ask you about Cognaize, can they find you?
Yeah, so easiest is my first name at lastname.com, or LinkedIn, I think, is also possible. I think I'm also on Facebook, but not so much active. But yeah, either way, I think I can be found. I usually answer my emails. It takes some time, but I answer them. So if somebody wants some talk about pain, you can contact me.
We'll make sure to link to your LinkedIn and your website when the episode's released. Again, thank you so much. I think this was one of the most interesting conversations Michael and I have had. And we'll stay connected. And thank you so much again.
Thank you. Thank you. It was very interesting. Thank you very much.